Hey everybody, I'm live and I have to explain what happened, why Scott Roeben is not on the show, and why I'm done doing this at 3:44 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's simply this because I came back and what happened basically is I'll just tell this straight out because you always say play it lay where it lay. For the last, I would say 14 days now, we have been without running water here because of a very unusual pipe leak that's in the concrete slab of our basement. And we went through 8 plumbers. Finally found one that, fingers crossed, uh, will get it done Monday. Who's working for a friend of the family, and specifically my mother and my stepfather, my deceased stepfather. But anyway, uh, so because of that, we've had to take a lot of special precautions. If you've ever been in that situation, you know how it can be when you have to adjust for not having running water, which means your toilets aren't functioning properly and everything else. That can produce its own level of exhaustion. Plus, I am here as a caregiver to my mom. And so I try to stay up late to, my wife's able to either do work or sometimes she'll need work, help at night and all that. And that combined with whatever's going on with me health wise, uh, Saturday, well, Friday, I went to bed very late, woke up Saturday, but didn't feel mobile. So I went back to sleep and woke up at 3:43 in the afternoon Eastern time. And I remember when I first woke up, I thought, oh, I got Scott at 4, but I thought, oh, no, he's 3 hours behind me, right? So, but I was really having a hard time moving. I was going to go and get the mail for my mom. And because I was slow walking, because it was hard to just sort of jumpstart. And regular viewers of my channel know that the mRNA in the Pfizer vaccines really helped me with my arthritis in a good way. So I have my last dosage of that was roughly now a month ago, and that was the 8th one. And so, but I thought maybe if I just get back to sleep, because the bit more rest I get, the better and more mobile I am, right? And it was difficult to be that through these last 14 days, and then waking up, having to meet plumbers, then doing work for my current client and trying to find more work and all that. So, and then of course, on top of all that, making sure the servers or server, uh, well, server is plural, working properly. That's an ongoing function of my what I do with respect to my company. And so that's about, I would say, 70% of my job, but as CEO. But aside from everything else. But so I woke up, I thought, well, if I just go to the gym and just do leg presses, that'll help. And then I try to keep up a daily regimen, but lately that has been difficult. And a lot of part of my function is simply to keep my mother company. And she'll be 89 on October 1st, and I want to make sure she gets there. So the job you would think is to keep her stress level low. And that has been a challenge because it seems like all this has been happening. And I keep thinking, Lord, why? And I'm the only child. All right. So what turned into my mother's request while I was at the gym to get Advil went from there to, well, basically buying groceries that were primarily needed. We had it already, but my mom's a stickler for making sure that we have a proper stock. And she's an excellent shopper. So I thought I could get that done and get back and realize I forgot this or I forgot to get the brush. I go back and get that. And so then I finally got back home and I didn't have the presence of mind to tell Scott or check to see if I was running late because I was so concerned about getting mom what she needed, calling her to make sure I got it right. Because if I don't get it right, she gets really upset. Um, and so I got back, and I was 13 minutes late going in. Okay, um, to the StreamYard room, this room here, and Scott had texted me 10 after saying, "Are we still on? Are you here?" And I explained to him what was going on. I said, "Scott, I couldn't get a hold of him." What the oh? And then he chimes in our direct message, and I told him what happened, and he his response was uh, that well, at first, was because I thought maybe you go do it now. He had said I'm out at 4:10, and that was at 7:07. And I went out and said, "Oh, so I'm trying to rush, right?" Because we budgeted 30 minutes. He asked me how long it was going to take. I said 30 minutes. So I was shocked that he was just going to leave at 4:10, his time. And I wrote, "Yeah, hi." I said I'm a caregiver for my mom, and she had an emergency that I just did, and that was an emergency call. I said, "Very sorry, I'm by myself helping her, which makes for errors. I figured I could get back on time. I'm back now. Can we still go, Zennie?" And then I went into the room because as soon as I got into the room, and I said, "Sorry, Scott, my mom is 88, and I got no one to help me, so I'm scrambling every day," and that's true. And I left the phone number. And he says, "Well, I'm here again. Very sorry. Should have tried. I'm waiting." Right? Doesn't get back to me. Doesn't get back to me until I think it's now uh, later, like 8:06 my time. And he says, "Sorry to hear that." So I was an hour later, right? He says, "Sorry to hear that." And I said, "Hey, I had to get mom's meds, but I'm back. Rough life for me, but I got to help her." He says, "I won't be able to take part, but I appreciate the invitation." So I assume he meant like that point. And I said, "I have to. She gave me a great life, but being an old child is hard." And I wrote a lot about what I was going through. And I said, "Hey, why not reset? Life happens." He says, "I'm in the middle of telling my viewers." I was about to actually tell you originally what happened on a separate video and didn't do that because he had chimed in. I was just getting ready to fire it up. Then I saw his text. That was an hour later, right? And so I said, "I would like to tell them I'll have another show." He says, "I got to tell you, I told a friend of mine who works for the ballpark that I was interviewing you, and he didn't respond. That doesn't stop me. It doesn't. So I said, but I got no feedback from him. And so he said, "I'm sorry it didn't work out. I'm just on to other things. Not a big deal." Okay, cool. And interviewing him was a big deal. And so ultimately he says, I said, "Look, things happen." He says, "I understand, but we never reschedule." Uh, so that's what happened, folks. And I want to, thank those people who had the idea of us, talking about the ballpark. So what I decided to do, uh, because I'm, interested in his take, is I pulled up his blog, and because I hadn't, I try to read it when I can, but of course, I'm producing my own video blog every take and everything else, and so I thought I would zoom in on. He does. It's not something he's talked about regularly. But as you can see, he says Tropicana could be demolished for Las Vegas A's ballpark. And he says in the most recent chapter, the team now says it will build a ballpark on the site of the Tropicana. And he talks about the process, and that he says, "We trust the new casino resort will be called Bally's Las Vegas. The former Bally's is now Horseshoe, and there will be a quiz." It is a confusing thing, right? And he has the logo here. Then he says, "A few days before this news was shared, the A's were back in discussions with Rio as a possible location for the team's new stadium, and that the festival grounds were out of the running a while back." And this is really valuable news. See, this is what I'm telling you. He's got an insider view. Phil Ruffin was insisting he get the revenue from concessions and parking, which would be a serious no-go for an MLB team. He says Rio made a lot more sense than the Tropicana for a lot of reasons, including the owners' dreams get offered the land for $1. But common sense doesn't drive decisions in Nevada when it comes to professional sports. It's professional sports. Closing the Tropicana site does significantly lower the amount of money the A's would be asking from taxpayers. So there's that. There was previously looking for 500 million. Now it'd be more 395 million. I think the reason that happens is because Bally has decided to actually put money into the project. I think that's what's going on there. He says the A's will pay 10.5 million a year under a 50-year lease agreement, according to Nevada Independent. Which, yeah, Nevada Independent's coverage of this is wanting because they don't pay attention to basic municipal finance lingo and just give it to you straight and use this situation opportunity to really teach people about municipal finance and what the players in this are thinking about. People I've known in a number of cases for some years, right? Uh, so anyway, he says, while it's bittersweet, Las Vegas could lose a classic casino. Relatively few people visit. The plan appears to be for Bally's to build a new 1,500 room hotel casino across from the stadium. And then he asks, how would it be across? We have no idea. And see, my thought was that it wouldn't be across. I think they're going to be actually melded in and may very well be one kind of mega structure with the appropriate divisions within it. I mean, how else to explain why they would expect 2.5 million visitors to the ballpark, but 30,000 seats, which means that they would be sold out by 200 plus every single game. Unless that can only happen if you're selling standing room only provisions. Okay. And so if a person's standing room only, that means to me that they can go out and see what else is going on or walk back to the hotel room. It seems like a logical possible setup, particularly the size of the land. And so um, anyway, he says Excalibur is across from the Tropicana, ditto MGM Grand. We assume they mean a portion of the Tropicana site, as was the plan at Rio. The A's say they'll start building a ballpark next year, 2024, with a tentative completion date in 2027. And he writes, this all has a dog chasing its own tail vibe to it. It's funny, but it appears the A's have landed an actual deal this time. As with the Wet and Wild site deal, which was reported as binding, that term is used differently than most would interpret it. And this is why I agree with him. But I'm now, this is something where, let's see what he says. He says the deal with Red Rocks was apparently contingent upon the A's getting public funding. We're pretty sure they have the same out in the Tropicana deal. Now, for me, what binding means is simply that, binding means that within the contours of that deal, you're supposed to do a something. Like, yet the deal is contingent upon public funding. The deal is contingent on whatever it says it's contingent on. But it doesn't mean that it's exclusive. And the media's went out with this idea, because they're not trained at these things, that binding means exclusive only to, that property. The A's can't go anyplace else. There's no word exclusive. If that were the case, the agreement would say that the A's do not have the right to seek land or deal or partnerships anyplace else. This is exclusive. That language is not in any of these agreements. So for the media to conclude what they did was just more proof of the fact that the journalists of today, who like to brag that they're journalists a bit too much, really don't do the homework and ask people who are specialists. What they do is they talk to other media people. Okay. And that happens a ton. Most of the, that happens a lot. And so I've tried to get a number of people who are specialists in, nothing against Scott. I don't view Scott as mainstream media, so he's different. He's a blogger. But the bottom line is, most of the people who run around calling themselves journalists don't talk. They don't really do journalism. They don't go and talk to the specialists or have them on their shows. They don't talk to people who actually do the financing. Okay. And they'll just say I have a source, and they're more interested in getting out what that person says that happens to go along the lines of what their thinking is. And that's wrong. Okay. That's really wrong. So they don't know how to do the calculations. And if you don't know how to do the math behind this, you'll never understand it. And so you really need to know the math behind it, or become interested in it, or talk to people who do know it and let them take you where the numbers go. and ask questions along the way, a lot of questions, and then deal with the answers and have an iterative process. But the way the media practices journalism today, they don't allow for that dynamic to occur. Bloggers do. I just have to be honest, bloggers do, but I digress. So anyway, Scott's writing, we don't care that much, all that much, about where the A's end up as long as they move to Las Vegas. Yeah, see, that's where I agree with Scott. I don't know what Scott was thinking, but my I want I want the A's in Las Vegas because the city of Oakland didn't do anything to do a deal to make this project work in a timely fashion. The city slow rolled it, and they allowed the A's to slow roll it, and the city paid attention to politically charged issues rather than the completion of development process issues. Now, what do I mean? I mean such things as, for example, if you're going to pay for this, where's the fund to collect the tax increment? That was never developed. Why? Because they never developed the tax increment enhanced infrastructure financing district grounds. They never approved it. Okay? That wasn't done. They paid a lot of attention to EIR. They paid attention to issues that were hot button for political people. But on top of that, you would say, well, even then, what was the real reason? The real reason was they didn't have they didn't have a stadium authority, which ironically enough was called for in the legislation, but it's called a public financing authority. SB 293 Skinner, designed for Howard Terminal, called for that, but they never activated it. And if they called for this authority, it would have met monthly. They would have been able to align their tasks and their reports on a monthly dated basis so that the public could see where they were at any given time, provide proper criticisms, help get the project back on track if certain things weren't done at a certain time. Okay. That was not done. So as a result, and it's not surprising, the website, the City of Oakland for Howard Terminal, quite literally is all over the place. It is not a coherent timeline of events. There's no monthly meetings. There's no chairperson. There's no discussion. There's no open forum. There's nothing. There's nothing to keep the project in line. So not surprisingly, it went off the rails. And it was on Oakland time rather than Major League Baseball time. And I believe this because Oakland, when I was trying to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland, acted like it was on Oakland time and not NFL time. And so I had to put the city literally on Oakland time, from Oakland time to NFL time all by myself. Literally fighting with the city, having the person who was my boss basically hold the bid book from San Diego that had been sent to us by a person who begged me to work, begged me to allow her to help me on the Super Bowl. She begged me for 3.5 weeks. Ignored her, finally let her do it. Then she gets this bid book and then doesn't want me to get it and puts me all through these hoops. And it turns out she's basically collaborating with the guy who's my boss to make sure I don't get it in a timely fashion. Why? Okay? It was all bizarre. And then when I finally got it from him, he said to me, see, here's some things that there are some things that are just as important as your Super Bowl. Not, hey, Zennie needs this right now because he has a meeting with Robert Bob. Not collaborative at all. Okay? At all. And then when I would ask to put them on my sports commission, they decline. Okay? Not when the they was very specific to the deputy director of redevelopment at the time. And what Clint Bolden did was wrong. It was completely 100% wrong. There was no reason for it. And it was like he was acting like a saboteur. Both of them. Okay. I'm saying that straight out. I mean, that was 1999. Okay. There's been enough water under the bridge, but I can just tell that truth. And in the city has, at every turn I've taken where I wanted to run something, turned its back on me. Did let me do it. I came this close to bringing Sega GameWorks in after a conversation at the Royal Exchange with Steve Ruzak, who represented Sega GameWorks in the Bay Area. So you say, what was Sega GameWorks? It was Sega GameWorks was a way of creating kind of like now we call it Dave and Buster's, but it was on a bigger scale, right in the middle of downtown Oakland. Great for kids, all right, young adults. You don't have a lot of activities for young kids and young adults even today in Oakland, okay? And it really would have helped provide a new anchor of activity for downtown Oakland at a time when it was needed the most, and really arguably still is. But no, I didn't get backing for that. You know, I was working for Elihu. Elihu didn't back it. Well, and then later admitted he made a mistake. Okay, they were afraid for me to do. Even before then, when I was an intern, 35 seamstresses were losing their contracts with Levi Strauss and lacked a just-in-time system, an incubator, where they can compete around the world and get orders and fill those orders. I met with them. This is 1987, 88. I met with them, established a plan to build an incubator at 3rd and Linden. My boss was George Williams and Austin Penny and Jeff Chu. Told me that I was too young to do that. Too young. All right. I mean, if someone takes the initiative, you don't shut them down. I wanted to have the legislation, that we get these stacks of legislation, right? And it was just sitting there, and a lady named Harriet would never touch them. This was before the internet. You'd read these books to find out if there was legislation that was being considered before the California legislature to determine if that had some impact on Oakland. Very important stuff. Just sitting there. So when she gives it to me after I lobbied to have it because she wasn't working on it, she says, "Here, I guess you can tell we don't like smart people." Oakland is diseased by this to this day. It culturally finds a way not to achieve its objective, particularly with sports. It let Jerry Brown talk itself into like, oh, sports is not important, when it is. And they think of it as sports, and like with Howard Terminal, only baseball, as opposed to the reality that a ballpark not only seats 25,000 to 55,000 people, but is such that it can be modified to hold the majority of the 200 different events that sports commissions around America generally compete to bring to their cities. That means eyeballs, that means marketing for the city. In many cases, free marketing if that event happens to be televised or heavily streamed and gets millions of viewers. All right, that's why so many cities are trying to get the NFL draft to come to their city. That's why so many cities are trying to go after the All-Star games and all these sports events. That's why Las Vegas has focused on sports as economic development. And it's the smart call, because it produces jobs for small businesses and contractors. Other people try to measure this by what what the big organization does. It's all screwed up, and they don't even consider the marketing aspect. They don't even look at what happens on the internet in terms of search regarding that host city name and how that city's name is lifted up with the number of events it has. Las Vegas gets it. That's money. Las Vegas gets it, okay? Oakland didn't get it, and it's because Jerry Brown infected Oakland with this pseudo-intellectual idea that one has to be smart, and therefore, if you're smart, you don't pay attention to sports. And that's ridiculous. A true intellectual doesn't close out things. So there's a lot of that crap going on. It still goes on today, and it's infected us, along with the fact that we have a strong mayor form of government, which has done nothing but create gigantic wave of constant instability among city staff, because you don't know how long the elected official that you're working for is going to be around, such that the long-term projects you're working on will be properly funded. All right. And now we've got this game where current mayors cut the funding of the Public Ethics Commission. Well, gee, doesn't she have certain investigations around her? Yes. So she's cutting the funding. All right. Think about it. And then the mayor comes back and says regarding Howard Terminal that it's been entitled. Howard Terminal has not been entitled. It was never officially voted on by the city council. Never got a development agreement done. So the A's felt, hey, you know what? We're going through Groundhog's Day. Every time we sit down, it's the same issue again and again and again and again and again. And they don't have the right numbers and they don't know what's going on. So you know what? We're going where it's saying. We're going to Las Vegas. And I don't blame them because I lived this stuff. Okay? I lived this stuff. So, and a lot of you have heard me talk about it before. So I was really anxious to have Scott come on, and share with him, give him that perspective. And share that, and maybe there'll still be that opportunity. All right. So anyway, so Scott says that soon Las Vegas will have all the sports. An NBA team is likely to go to the Oakview project and to work south of the Strip, other than having a professional croquet team. But we're fairly sure somebody's working on that too. And he writes, as we are not a sports person, the more sports, the less interest we have in Las Vegas. That's wild. He says sports are pushing out the things that make Las Vegas, Las Vegas. And Las Vegas social media streams are so full of live tweeting sports. There's hardly room for anything good. That's interesting. I think. See, I see. That's where I would love to hear his view, because I view Las Vegas as sports. When I think about all the great fights, boxing matches, and now we've got football events, hockey. Las Vegas, to me, is building itself, rightly so and smartly so, as a sports mecca. And there's the gambling element you cannot discount, because UNLV has figured out how to do that, how to make that work. But anyway, he goes on. He says, we don't begrudge sports fans their sports. We just wish they could enjoy it to themselves. Casinos need no sports zones and no TV zones and no high-fiving zones. It's all fun and games until someone puts an eye out. He says, everyone seems excited for the Oakland A's move to Las Vegas, except for people who actually pay attention to baseball and realize the team and owner we're getting. And he says, we asked the top executive of a major Las Vegas casino to share his thoughts. He said, quote, you can never have too many imaginary stadium sites. He added, he says the A's are not particularly well run. And then he goes on to write, should this deal proceed, it appears the Trop's days are numbered, so visit while you can. There has been no date given for potential closure of the Strip casino, but things move quickly in Vegas when sports are involved. If you blink, you may have missed the massive F1 headquarters being built. People lost their minds when Hard Rock said it will be dismantling the Mirage volcano. They really should be mourning the loss of that glorious stained glass ceiling above the casino floor at the Trop. Las Vegas is all about change. He's right about that. As long as we get a new casino, we'll let the A's move to town. Having a winning record would be a good thing too. Thanks. So, and he says, share this. He doesn't. He says, leave your thoughts. And he has 26 comments. Susan Levy says he always says that they excel. When a mess with this be is heartbreaking. And he says it's incredible how the government gives away taxpayers to find a private for-profit business. This will be an interesting discussion, because he says, oh, what a waste. Like you, Scott, I hate sports and baseball. Paul Shannon says, thanks to explain this complicated A's deal. He's drifted about Vegas. He says, back in the day, used to put stadiums in cornfields. The Tropicana is insulated with asbestos throughout. And he says it would be mitigated from within hundreds of hazmat suits. And I believe they have already had a plan for that from the Tropicana Mega Resort. I'm more concerned about the Caliche. And this person's talking about, well, there's no tax increase here. All right, let me make that clear. There's no tax increase. Now, there may have to be, all right, Hopper says, Oakland, the city that can't, Las Vegas, the city that can. Yeah. And he says, Vegas will pressure Fisher to put in a quality team or sell it. And I think I absolutely agree with you, Hopers. And I think what Scott is missing is that in Las Vegas, there are plenty of people to properly direct the A's. In Oakland, There are only a handful of people to properly direct the A's, and those people were not in government. Okay. I interviewed Dave Kaval last year. We've like 7 times. And one of the things that I asked Dave, I said, Dave, would you like to have a developer partner? He said, sure. I'm trained to do economic development. I begged the previous mayor to let me run the effort. Okay. And instead, Libby used it to make some political points about who she thought could do it by, gender and all that. And my point is, I'll say this straight out. I agree with her to a point. But when you do it, you make sure that you call people. If you're going to do it from gender, you say, okay, what women can I get involved that have experience at sports architecture, sports financing? You don't just bring in anybody because your your assistant city administrator has a friend who does real estate. That was disrespectful to the process, yet that's what the mayor did. Okay. As opposed to when I was helping her with respect to the Raiders, I cold called Diane Paulway, then managing director of Piper Jaffray, who is known for her work on the St. Louis baseball stadium financing. So if you're going to get someone, you say, hey, look, I want to get someone, but I want a best team of women. You call the best team of women who have that specialization. You don't insult people by just thinking anybody can do it. But that's what Libby, my god sister who I love, did it. That's a fact. Okay. And this is beyond, my comment is beyond the personal relationship. But the bottom line is you cannot sugarcoat it because the city's very future has been damaged by what has went down through the strong mayor years that it's been active since 2000 when Jerry Brown fired Robert Bob because Robert Bob wanted to build a downtown ballpark for the Athletics at Uptown. Do that. All this talk, including my talking about this, stops because the A's are playing downtown. They're doing extremely well. They're worth a ton of money. And Oakland is one of the premier destinations for baseball. That's what Jerry Brown chased away. Robert went to Washington, D.C., helped bring the Montreal Expos from Montreal to DC to become the Washington Nationals, built a brand new stadium, and the rest is history. Okay? The rest is history. And he said Oakland got the shaft from Shaft. Thao isn't the major reason for the move of the A's. Actually, she is. Because, and this is where I disagree. Okay? And I don't actually know who you are, but that doesn't matter. Sheng could have changed it. Sheng could have turned around and put me in charge and said, hey, look, I really want to make a statement here. Zennie Zennie started this by giving the Athletics the idea of tax increment financing. He's ran the numbers. He has a history of running projects, putting together coalitions. I'm bringing him in to fix this. All right. That would have sent earthquakes and shockwaves through the city of Oakland, but I guarantee you it would have gotten done because my first act would have been to immediately start the process of approval of the tax increment financing zone and the establishment and the seating of the public financing authority. And that would have properly aligned us. Okay? That would have properly aligned us. If you have any doubts, just go back to my writings about this back in 2021 when I pointed out that we didn't have an infrastructure financing plan or authority or anything. I've been consistently on this. So you want to find out how we got to where we are right now? Read Oakland News Now, blog.com. All right. And he said, okay, did Fisher make the decision to move to Las Vegas in October of 2022? Clearly, I don't know, but suppose that was the case. No, this is what happened. All right. The decision to start what became a move started on the 27th of March of 2021 when Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred said, look, we cannot see a vision to a ballpark in Oakland, or words to that effect, because on key deadlines for documents, the city was behind. But also might add the A's were behind too. Okay. To this day, we do not have a complete set of drawings for a ballpark at Howard Terminal, which is why you couldn't really do a complete development agreement without complete drawings that tell you, among other things, how high the stadium is going to be. All right. I'm serious. Those were among the problems. And see, there was no stadium authority and no public approval of documents to be inserted to say, hey, look, this document, the Stadium Authority in Las Vegas did that. This document's complete. That document's complete. We need your signature on this. So they would sign off on all these documents. There was no authority in Oakland for anybody to sign off so that anybody could sign off on these documents being completed. So how do we know what was completed and not? It was all over the place. We don't know anything. All right. So, okay, this is a piecemeal mess. I said the same thing to the Joint Powers Authority on Friday morning. I said it was piecemeal. We have to stop this effort. We have to stop it. Okay. Hold on one moment, please. Let me just do something real quick here. I will be right back. I just have to. That and you hear me? Okay, cool. Now again, okay, so the official made the decision to move to Vegas in October 22. Okay, what happened was it all started that March. When that started, okay, when that started, March 2021, March 27th, 2021. Then the mayor said, Libby Schaff, the mayor said, we have to get the county of Alameda involved. And so unrolled a process which led to a July 20th big meeting, right? With a term sheet, okay? But the term sheet is not a development agreement. But what Libby didn't do was she didn't establish the public financing authority or tax increment financing revenue, yet said she wanted to use tax increment financing. And her retort was, we don't know how much the stadium is going to cost. You have an idea. They kept saying it's going to be $2 billion, well, 1.5, 2 billion. But then you have to ask the question, what do I need in terms of assessed value, right? As my base year in order to properly jumpstart and get an increment large enough to draw from, to among other things, pay administrative costs and then draw a bond issue off of. And then so can I make a deal with the taxing agents and say, hey, look, we have 55 acres of land here. Can we have your base year as well as that? Because the difference between the drawing the base year monies, right, and then the increment monies and adding them together is at from year one a difference between 800,000 and 20,800,000. That's a huge difference. You can start a healthy bond issue at 20,800,000. Okay, but 800,000, you got a problem. So I would have negotiated for that because at the end of the day, it's just 55 acres. And what happened is that the press was really screwing up the conversation by talking about the size of the map rather than the assessed value. And I told them that, look, you can have a large map, right? But let's say the assessed value along that map is only $100 million total, whereas you have one that's 55 acres and the assessed value is $12 billion, which is in point of fact what the Athletics were going to build in total build out. Which, by the way, no one figured out except me, what the tax increment revenue was going to be. All right, so and this is all over the place because Dave says, well, it's $12 billion and that's my economic impact. All right, and that was after. All right, that was in 2022, 1-2, just after Bob had said, hey, look, let's do the Las Vegas and Oakland. So my point is that the mayor didn't start it off right. She didn't have anybody around her, including her consultants, to tell her, hey, look, this is how you're supposed to do it. Okay. And she insisted on making herself the face of the project. Normally, a project like that has a specialized, seasoned public official in charge of it, not an elected official. Elected officials are not supposed to make themselves the face of complex projects like this one, but Libby insisted on doing it, and Sheng is doing the same doggone thing. So no, it's a bad model. All right. Keith says, I doubt the current mayor of Oakland has a clue. She stated Oakland was close to a deal, which seems so far from the truth of the matter. It is far from the truth because Howard Terminal is not, not, not entitled. In fact, I overheard her say in one of her comments, actually, maybe another 2 years. So she probably put a qualifier in there when someone said, "Hey, by the way, Sheng, I think maybe okay." I called her and I left her a message. I said, Sheng, and I didn't say Sheng. I said, Ms. Mayor, the city has not approved Howard Terminal. It is not entitled. Okay. Hopert says, was the deadline to get the agreement before the November 2022 election? I admit that there was no deadline. The deadline to get an agreement was before then. We were 2 years behind schedule. Gavin signed SB 293 Skinner Law October 11th, 2019. If you started the process of doing the public financing authority and the infrastructure financing plan, and then had a public financing authority with the item dates, we would have done our work regarding a development agreement. We would have been ready to do a development agreement under a coherent a grand alignment plan, okay? And an organizationally grand alignment plan, we would have had our development agreement done by the start of 2022. All right. In fact, that was the original plan. But the city kept showing its timeline, but they kept leaving out financing. It was crazy. It's like they're allergic to financing. And then Libby got on my show and admitted that they didn't have the experience. Ms. Mayor. All right. So he says proper previous planning prevents piss poor performance. I'm not picking on Oakland, but the US as a whole. We don't get blank done anymore. He's right. Was the rest of this Oakland City Council on board with Howard Terminal? Fife was no, they weren't. And that was the other problem. Because of the slow rolling of the project, it allowed first media to get a hold of it. Second, communicate a lot of gibberish and garbage around it because the media had no idea what it was talking about. And then media likes to have access to public officials who, in today's left-right environment, are trying to work you either one way or the Oakland. But in Oakland's parlance, everybody is to the left. It's just how left they are. And I don't mean how left in terms of spectrum, but I mean how left in terms of what they think left is. Like, for example, if you talk to the Democratic Socialists, you'll get as many different answers about what socialism is as there are Democratic Socialists. It's crazy, all right? So my point is, you got to deal with that morass in order to get something done. And the longer you let these projects linger rather than getting on point and doing things time on task, you will get stuck with Oakland's politics. It will slow it down and it will erode your ability to accomplish it. Fair warning to anybody trying to do business in Oakland. You set a process, go about the process, get it done quickly, or you suffer the consequences. Okay. Forbes really did a bad number, claiming 60 million in profit for the A's, which was later retracted to 20 million, but number 60 million is still being used by the media because the media doesn't care. And the best thing to do is basically just say, hey, look, I'm not listening to you. I'll listen to Zennie. Sorry. Because we're the media too. I am, Scott's the media and bloggers. We have a better code of ethics than journalists today, I argue. So my point is, those are the things that we were going to talk about. I'm sorry, Scott didn't come on. It wouldn't have been about this long. It would have been very constructive. And I think he really missed out on really been a lot of fun conversation. More him than me because I want people to understand where he's coming from about it. Because as far as I'm concerned, he's Mr. Las Vegas when it comes to what's happening. And, he's been through a lot with this and even got sued by Sahara, and they lost the lawsuit. Very similar to something that I went through and won. He won. You know, putting out the truth is a hard thing to do. It should be lucrative. Perez says it won't get done, period. You mean it won't get done in the Vegas context? Nah, it'll get done. And the reason it'll get done is very simply um, doing business in Oakland is like Don Quixote. Yeah. The reason it'll get done in Las Vegas is because what's going on behind the scenes, there's the media version of what's going on behind the scenes, which is here, right? And what's really going beyond this science, which is here. Okay, actually, well, excuse me. The media version of what's going on behind the scenes is here, and what's going on is actually here. They're far different. For example, the only concern, the only problem is debt coverage ratio. What is that? Do you have enough money in revenue to cover the bond debt? And right now, the answer is no, because the A's bankers keep screwing with the revenue, thinking that it's theirs, and it's not. It's not. It pays in. And the nutty thing about the A's bankers is that they'll say, they act like they'll say, well, you know what, you have to share the risk with us. Excuse me, asking a public organization like Clark County and Las Vegas Stadium Authority to float a bond is already asking for them to share the risk. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up, okay? This is not fantasy. This is what people who are working on this project are dealing with right now with respect in Las Vegas, all right, with respect to the Athletics. Okay, this is solid gold fact, all right? And it's crazy making. And it's simple. It's not, well, we're quibbling over this dollar or that. No, they're quibbling over how much money they need so they can get a $2 of revenue to $1 bond cost. Why? So the doggone bond doesn't default and the county winds up dipping into its coffers to have to pay for it. That's why. Okay? That's why they're going through all this. Because they knew also in the Raiders parlance that they were under the impression that a 1.5 to 1 debt coverage ratio would work. And the finance director, Jessica Colvin, gave all these reasons why. Because there was this guy who was a video blogger who had made this model and determined that, you know what, this thing is not going to pay for itself. And that right out the gate, it's going to have structural problems because the tax, the stadium hotel tax, should have been 1%, rather the 88/100ths of 1%. And thank God they didn't try to use 7/10 of a percent, which was at one point a proposal that wound up in a draft of the legislature of the law that was Senate bill that was going to the legislature. Right? They should have left it at 1%. The reason why they brought it down was because you had people on the Southern Nevada Tourism and Infrastructure Committee who were concerned that competitor cities like Chicago would take that 1% and say, hey, see that? They're asking you to pay for more. Come to Chicago, have CES in Chicago, which I would never dream of. And you can spend less money. That was what they were concerned about. But to me, the elasticity of demand to have a convention in Vegas versus anywhere else was not so sensitive that you had to put the stadium tax at 88/100ths of 1%. You could have left it at 1%. They could have come away with a healthy debt coverage ratio. They could have come away with a healthy reserve and everything else. But they didn't do it that way. And so when the bond was let on April 4th of 2018, April 18th of 2018, I'm sorry, well, it's April 4th of 2018, what happened a few weeks after? Took a couple of weeks? Hey, News 8 reported it. Bond revenue not great enough to cover costs. Ooh, who told them that? Ding. Jessica Colvin had a special meeting with me privately, and with another person I'm not going to mention. She assured everything was handled. It wasn't. Now they're super sensitive. So you can thank me for making absolutely certain they got it right, because they bothered to listen to me in a way that Oakland doesn't. and treats me like crap along the way. I've had, let's see, now former supervisor Scott Haggerty, the mayor, Oakland Mayor Libby Schaff, and more recently, I'm not even going to mention him because he apologized for it, but he's on the JPA right now. Say, basically, thanks for giving us free advice, or we like you there. I'm saying, look, put me on the JPA board. All right. Originally, Ray Bobbitt said that he wanted me to represent them on the JPA board this year. That never happened. So they are so afraid of having me, officially in charge of anything that they don't know what to do with themselves. And yet I'm out there yapping. And I'm not going to stop yapping because they've been treating me like crap. Because I care. Isn't that stupid? I mean, it's just massively stupid. And they don't want to pay me, all right, at all. And yet they'll pay somebody a ton of bucks, like they've been doing with certain people, and they make all kinds of mistakes and get them absolutely nowhere. Nowhere. And then the former council members talk about what they did, and no one contemplates what they did wrong. Oh, it's everything they did is automatically right. In spite of the fact that we're losing teams. Okay? And this is why, again, I'll say it, Andy Dolich and Dave Newhouse wrote this ridiculous account that doesn't even talk to people in government and didn't even include me because Dave Newhouse didn't think I should be running the effort to bring Super Bowl. He thought I should have been George Lucasa. I told was the president of the Coliseum prior to that, right? I told Dave at breakfast in 1999 at the Marriott in Oakland. I said to him, George Lucasa doesn't want to do it. He doesn't like the people involved. He doesn't like Ignacio, all right? He's got a huge beef with him. I said, I know how to do this. I'm doing it. Dave could have written something that backed me. It wouldn't have killed him. All right? So ask Dave why he didn't do it. Because he doesn't call me and say, hey, Zennie, I'm sorry. And he owes me an apology. So when Dave and Andy talk about why sports teams leave Oakland, they should also ask themselves what kind of role they played in it, especially Dave. Or look over at the San Francisco Chronicle when the editorial page editor was there, and it took me a year to get John Diaz to flip around and write a column in support of our Super Bowl Oakland. Got it. And then like a few months later, he turned around and stabbed me in the back and said, well, you don't have Jerry involved, as opposed to writing, hey, you know what? Jerry Brown should be helping Zennie Abraham, which is supportive. Okay? I called John, and I almost lost my vocal cords. I was so upset because I was stabbed in the back for no reason, no reason at all. All right. So, all right. And so when you remember being born like I do, you remember every single aspect of what happened to you, what time it happened, where you were, who said what to whom. You don't forget it. And unfortunately, I got a brain like that. So I don't forget crap at all. So, it says, doing business in Oakland like Don Quixote. Yep. He says, and maybe in the future, Oakland officials will use what's taking place in Las Vegas as a case study. That's in the future when? I mean, let me ask you, how many times does Oakland have to get hit over the head by Vegas, taking their sports teams? Don't you think it's kind of like right now because there's nothing else to take? Or maybe they'll just, for grin, say, well, hey, we know Oakland Roots Soccer isn't MLS, but we'll take them anyway. We'll build them in the MLS just to spite you. I mean, that's not going to happen, but you know what I mean? Okay? This is ridiculous. And Oakland Roots Soccer has no business being outside the Coliseum. And AASEG has no business supporting it. Why? You're robbing your naming rights value. You're going to have these people outside the stadium when the stadium needs all the events it can get inside to boost its naming rights value. I mean, no one's thinking here. It's all political. And once again, it's all piecemeal. And there's no one that's just got enough cojones to say, you know what? That is not happening. This is the plan we need to go on. We will support you. We will finance you. Stay in the Coliseum. Yet we got an organization. We got the Oakland Soul and the Oakland Roots playing in Hayward because they can't be no one in Oakland's found anything for them, which is ridiculous. So they go and visit them in Hayward and they say, oh, the Oakland Soul. That's ridiculous. I have people in Oakland who are saying, you know what? Why can't they be in Oakland? Because then they have to drive all the way to Hayward to see them? You see what I'm getting at? Shh. Half blank, half done. Bart Simpson, the episode, Mary Bobbins. Yeah. All right. 4:39 in the morning, almost an hour. I bid you all adieu until later today when I talk about taxing or financing. I'm clearing the decks and getting all this out of the way. Got a long list, folks. Live long and prosper in your world. Subscribe to Zennie62. Please bookmark oaklandnewsnowblog.com and share this around. Please, I beg of you, share it around. And have a good night. Thank you. You too.